Hello, everyone. My name is Victor from Swana. I am here to talk to you about an announcement made by the Finance Minister of the Republic of South Africa, Tito Mboweni. He made an announcement on 28th July. Among other things, although he was talking about the rescue package, getting the economy of South Africa to recover, and what measures the government will be putting in place, he also touched on a very curious issue about workers being allowed, possibly being allowed, because he said he was still in discussions, but workers being possibly allowed to withdraw from their pension funds or borrow from their pension funds. He qualified that, of course, by saying it's not just financing a lavish lifestyle, but it will be about paying off debt, which had me even more worried. But you know, when you talk about things like this, you need to talk to experts, specialists who know about pension, retirement, who are doing it for a living. One of them is the guest joining me now. He's the executive in charge of consulting at Alexander Forbes. Her name is Butši Tladi. Welcome, Butši. I appreciate that you could join us. But consulting, I did not think Alex Forbes does consulting.
Yes, we actually do. Victor, many of us know us as pension funds administrators, but before we administer pension funds, we are in a privileged position to advise many employers about how to go about ensuring that people have adequate savings in retirement. So me and my colleagues spend a lot of time with employers putting together structures that will assist their employees one day when they retire. And yeah, so that's what we do.
Now, in a nutshell, in a tweet, if I may say, what did the Minister of Finance announce regarding pensions? Can people go out as I speak to you and withdraw or borrow from their pension funds?
Not as yet, but in essence, I think the minister was empathetic towards South Africans and employees in particular, to say, what can we do to make it possible for people to alleviate some of the burden that they're experiencing? And Victor, you may recall that even before COVID hit, issues of over-indebtedness or perhaps living above one's means existed even before then. But those have been exacerbated by this pandemic that has hit all of us. But maybe before we even go into that, it is worth maybe having a reminder about why pensions exist and why pension funds are there. If many of us appreciate that even after we retire, we probably will live for another 20 years. And in that time, we probably will not earn an income. So these funds, in essence, saying during our waking lives, can we put away something to look after us in retirement? So in essence, if one appreciate that even now, as we, even before COVID hit, literally out of 100 of us, only 8 had enough to go into retirement. So those that were contributing towards retirement funds, and it is not many of us, only 8% of those had enough. And those 8% were probably people that never cashed in during their waking lives. So if we now go in and allow us to access or erode some of that savings, we are creating an even bigger problem. Somebody even says that we're probably maybe stealing from our future selves. So one needs to be very careful. But Vic, if I understand clearly what the minister has said, in essence, he's not necessarily asking us to erode on that capital or on that savings. What we are talking about is allowing us to probably access some form of loans to alleviate some of the financial crunch that we may be in. So simply, maybe putting it simply, you're taking a loan in order to service a loan. One would then have to decide whether that is the best route for themselves.
Well, I'm asking you, is it a good idea to borrow from your long-term retirement savings to pay off a loan? Would the minister not have done well or better by asking the banks to give South Africans a debt freeze instead?
So I guess it depends. It's always a challenge. And again, that's why we consult, because no one answer fits everybody. To take out a loan to fund one's consumptions for today is probably not a good idea. But if one takes out a loan to invest in something that will generate income, something that will create or grow their own wealth, perhaps it's something to be considered. But it is going to be very difficult to decide who's going to use their money wisely and to come up with a criteria about what is wise use of one's money. Because I think there's often this misunderstanding, or people often want to say that it is my money. Why must somebody try and restrict me in its use? So it's going to be a very difficult one.
Well, why? Answer that question. Why must somebody restrict anybody in deciding what to do with their money?
You know, it sounds very paternalistic, but you know what? Even those funds that we're talking about today, the ones that we're trying to access, they only exist because somebody often forced us to put them away. Not many of us are disciplined enough to, in any 1 month, put something away for a rainy day. And what I can tell you now, for many of us, it is easy to spend money. It is a lot more difficult to save money. And we know that as a country, our own savings culture is not one of the strongest. And one of the things that we worry about in trying to access these monies prematurely is that we're creating a burden for a future generation. Because at some point when we retire, we may not have enough to retire on. And what we do know and we've experienced is that part of what becomes a failed state, it is one that has a lot of burden for the state. And what we have now is a system that begins to alleviate some of that. And if we compromise that system, we could end up with much bigger problems as a country later on.
Already as it is, the country is indebted. I think he mentioned something about 80% of our GDP. And that means we are literally stealing from our grandchildren and great-grandchildren. In closing, what would you say somebody who heard the announcement and is really in financial trouble and is being tempted to borrow from their pension should do? What is the idiot's guide Butši Tladi can give me if I'm really feeling the pinch, and many of us are? But I also don't want to create a problem that I'm dependent on the state.
I'd say think long and hard, because in essence, it is a loan. And it's a loan that you're going to access through your bank. At the very least now, you are secured in terms of something in retirement. The fact remains that we need to begin to manage our finances better. For me, the crux of the issue is how we better manage that. Because remember, this is not about people that are out of jobs. People out of jobs can access their pension funds anyway. This begins to deal with those of us that are still in employment, that still have jobs. And the question is, how do we best live our lives in such a way that our finances are not in the mess that they may be today?
Wow, that is a point to close it on. If you are in employment, hang tough, find an alternate way, adjust your way of spending money, because this is mainly for people who are out of a job, not people who are still employed. I know it is tempting. I know we saw on social media how everybody was getting excited, almost saying, let me go and take my money, because we have been through a lot, but it's not permanent. So do not make some decision or do something that will have a permanent impact on your livelihood and the welfare of your children and your grandchildren, because you are hearing incorrectly what the minister said. Butši Tladi, thank you very much.
Thank you so much.